Okay, boys and girls, here's the PowerPoint on World War II, and I'm going to go over the buildup of World War II here. If you look at this picture, it's a very historic picture. You see the guy to the right is Joe Stalin. The guy in the middle is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the American president. And the guy to the left there is Winston Churchill. And these are the big three in World War II who are going to come together and have to be the allies to try to beat Hitler, okay? The road to the road to the war, 1919 and 1939, is what we're going to start with today here, okay? And so I know this is hard to read, but I'm going to try to talk you through it. You need to realize that World War II is all because of the horrible Versailles Treaty. The Versailles Treaty, which was negotiated by the French and British, was not fair. Germany was screwed. Germany was not even invited. They had to pay war reparations, which gave them hyperinflation. They had to give up a lot of land. They had to give up this land that's given to France. If you look here by Strasbourg, this green stuff, that land there is the Rhine land that they had to give up in the Alsace-and-Lorraine to France. There also was a DMZ. If you see the blue there by Belgium, that is called the DMZ. And the DMZ right there, it means demilitarized zone. That means nobody can go in there. No German troops, no French troops, okay? And so the Treaty of Versailles was not fair. It wasn't fair to Germany. It wasn't fair to Italy. It wasn't fair to Japan. And so this is going to be the main reason why World War II is going to start, because people want payback. Also, it's because of a weak League of Nations. One of the things that our American President Woodrow Wilson was able to put in there was something that we should have a League of Nations that works out problems before war happens. But there are two reasons why the League of Nations is weak. Number one, you'll notice the white countries are not members. Who's not a member? America. Remember, our Congress did not approve the treaty. That became a problem. The other one is there's no army involved in the League of Nations. So they can't enforce people to follow what they want them to do. And if you have no teeth, no one's going to follow them. Also, the ineffectiveness of the League of Nations. They did do some good things, but they had no control over major conflicts, no progress in disarmament, and no effective military force. The other particular theory I want you to see, and this is something we talked about before here, is that stabbed in the back theory. This is actually a picture, and the circle guy is supposedly Adolf Hitler in his unit because he fought in World War I. He fought in these trenches, which were very hellish, and he did it for Germany. But when Germany didn't even get invited to the treaty, and Germany even signs and agrees with the treaty, people feel like they were stabbed in the back. And this is not only Hitler, it's also Mussolini and also many other people. The Weimar Republic is a government that took over after the fall of Kaiser Wilhelm after World War I. And this Weimar Republic was very corrupt. You can see this political cartoon shows people in the background poor. This one guy lost a leg from the war. These people are not happy. And then, of course, here are the leaders at the poker table spending all the people's money. It did not make things easier, and this is actually the government that began to print extra money to pay the war debt, which caused Germany to have hyperinflation. Now, the French aren't stupid. The French hate the Germans hate the French, and the French got the Germans in World War I. And so what's very interesting is kind of one of his huge military blunders is France actually they actually prepared for World War II. And that preparation was building something called the Maginot Line. And this Maginot Line are these red dots that are in between France and Germany. And what it was is a huge fortress of military fortifications. It was like a cement trench that allowed for it all to be aimed at Germany, okay? aimed at Germany. So if Germany would attack, they would have this giant 1,000-mile trench. And this trench would be cased in concrete. It would have hospitals underground. It had these big cannons facing towards Germany. And the idea was if Germany did attack, we'll stop them. The problem is World War II is a different war. And what the Germans are going to do, you see how the red dots stop here? They're going to go right around them and attack France anyways. But we'll talk about that later. Here's another example of this false sense of security. You see the yellow line is the Maginot Line, okay? And so remember, in World War I, it was a trench warfare. I'd sit in the trench and cross no man's land and try to survive. But in World War II, it was movement. It was a type of warfare called blitzkrieg, where they would use tanks and trucks, and they would be constantly moving around the battlefield. There was no staying in one spot. And the Maginot Line was great for staying in one spot. And so what Germany did, and they actually followed the Schlieffen Plan. If you remember the Schlieffen Plan from World War I, is they just kind of went right around the Maginot Line through neutral Belgium. And the interesting part is these cannons here were aiming towards Germany, but they couldn't turn. They weren't movable types of weapons, and so the Germans went right around it. There were also a lot of idealistic laws passed during the 1920s. The Loreno Pact was a pact all these countries signed to try to keep war from happening. The funniest one was the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which actually made war an illegal tool to use in diplomacy. Yet it had no teeth to it. So it's like, hey, I outlaw violence. Woohoo! Yeah, who's going to follow that? So these laws are very idealistic and not going to work. The Great Depression is going to have a big impact in this war. We mentioned it before. Because times are so tough, people turn to radical leaders like Adolf Hitler and Mussolini to try to fix our depression, try to fix our society. Germany was 10 times worse than us, and this is going to allow the rise of these evil dictators. I guarantee if the economy was better during this time, we wouldn't have these types of leaders. This is going to be Japan. I'm going to skip that. Now, what Hitler is going to decide to start doing as early as 1936 is he is going to start violating the Treaty of Versailles. He's going to break the rules. And the first place he's going to do is he's going to break into this Rhineland, this demilitarized zone that's in orange. He is going to invade his troops in there. Now, this is against the Treaty of Versailles. And as you know, when you break a law, if you break a rule in school, you got to get busted. But if you don't get busted, that's what causes a problem. And that leads to that concept from the question for the day called appeasement, where basically the world saw Germany break the treaty and they kind of looked the other way. They appeased. They gave in to them. They gave in to them because they didn't want a war. And they also gave in to them probably because most people, even France themselves, would agree that Treaty of Versailles was unfavorable, unfair, and not right. And so they gave in to him. But the thing about Hitler is if you let me do something, I'm going to do something more. So appeasement's going to backfire. United States tried to stay neutral out of this, 1934, 35, 37, 39. Remember, we're neutral. We don't want to be involved. We would love to sell you weapons and make money, but we don't want to be involved. There were many people that were trying to keep us out of the war. Now, in 1936, there's going to be a Rome-Berlin Access Treaty, where if you look here, Adolf Hitler to the right and Benito Mussolini to the left are going to form a treaty called the Axis Powers. And eventually, Japan will join them as well. Now, what's interesting about Japan is Japan was not invited to the Treaty of Versailles either. And Japan did fight in World War I, and so they also have some commonality things. Also, what's interesting about Japan that is similar to Germany is, Germany believed in the master race. Well, so did Japan. The Japanese thought that they were the master race of Asia, the first order. So there's a lot of similarities going on there. So these guys are the bad guys. It's going to be Mussolini, Hitler, and Japan as the bad guys. Now, there was a Spanish Civil War that happened right before World War II. They call it the dress rehearsal, and it took place in Spain. And in Spain, a very important leader is going to come to power in Spain, a guy named Francisco Franco. He is also a fascist, like Hitler and Mussolini. And in this Civil War, Germany is going to come to help the Spanish. And in the Spanish Civil War, we even sent some troops there to try to stop fascism. But in the end, Francisco Franco, this guy in the middle, is going to take over. Now, the interesting thing about Francisco Franco is he does not get involved in the war. He does not get involved in World War II. But right before World War II, he had a little civil war, which he won. And also this gave the Nazis, when they went and helped out Francisco Franco, they gave him a chance to, test drive some of their new weapons. And that also is going to help lead to the war. This is actually a famous picture called Guernica by Pablo Picasso. You might have heard of him before. And it's a city in Spain that was firebombed by the Nazis, where after they were done, there wasn't one building left standing. And so this picture, if you look deep at it, it's people in pain and misery. We're going to skip the Japanese. As I told you, if you give in to Hitler, he's going to take more. In 1938, Hitler wanted to take over Austria. And he decides to basically go in there and take it over peacefully, okay? He actually stages propaganda in a radio broadcast saying that the Austrians want him to take over. Regardless, you can't take over other countries. And this is also a violation of the Treaty of Versailles. But what does the world do? It does nothing. There's also another problem with the Sudetenland. The Sudetenland is this gold in this area here. It's right on the border of Germany. Now, here's the issue. In that Sudetenland, it's like filled with German-speaking people, basically meaning they're German. However, they live in Czechoslovakia, because boundaries are redrawn after every war, and Hitler basically made the case, I wanted to take over the Sudetenland because it's full of Germans. And this border, whoever drew it wrong. Now, of course, this is a problem. You can't just take over countries, although he already took over the Rhineland and Austria. Well, now we can't have this happen. And so Neville Chamberlain, who is going to be the Prime Minister of Europe, ends up going and meeting with Hitler 4 times to try to get him to not take the Sudetenland. And it was almost ready for wartime. And eventually Neville Chamberlain, Hitler would not agree, came up with a peace offer where Hitler says, you let me take the Sudetenland, I will not take anything else, which is a big fat lie. But once again, it's appeasement. Would I hear this one quote? An appeaser is someone who feeds the alligator, hoping the alligator doesn't eat him last. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Czechoslovakia becomes part of the Third Reich. And look at that picture of that woman crying and hailing to Hitler at the same time. Very powerful picture. Tomorrow you're going to be talking about the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact. And what the Germans knew is they did not want to be in a two-front war again. Last war they had the Russians and the French attacking from different angles. So what they decided to do this time was Hitler made an agreement with Stalin to stay out of the war. And if you stay out of the war, I'm going to give you a chunk of Poland. So the whole goal was Germany was going to invade Poland here. And after they invade Poland, they would give all of East Poland to the Russians for not getting involved in the war. So Hitler very cleverly eliminated the two-front war before it happened. And before that, it's going to start the war, and we'll be getting to that tomorrow.